Hey, how's it going? In this video, I'm going to show you how you can build Spring Boot API, including all the CRUD operation like get, put, delete, and post. We're going to create a new project where we'll create an API where you will be able to get the data, delete the data, update the data, and add new data. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started with Spring Boot using IntelliJ as an IDE and create a new project. So let's start by creating a new project. I'm going to click on new project in IntelliJ. Here I'm going to select Spring Initializer and I'm going to name it REST. While creating project, you need to select DevTools and Spring Web. If you followed my previous tutorials for this series, I've already explained this Spring Boot application annotation will mark this class as an entry point for our Spring Boot application. Now, to be able to create an API, we need to first of all create a controller. And I'm going to create a class, and I'm going to make this class as basically a REST controller. So we're going to name this class as REST API controller. And I'm going to mark this class with @REST controller. And once I do that, IntelliJ is smart enough to import this for us. So we got this Spring Boot application, we got this REST controller. Our goal is to create a CRUD operation API, which means we need to have a function to create, update, delete, and get. For that, I'm going to create a class. This is going to be a simple Java class. Here we have a class as coffee, and this class is going to have ID and a name. Is a constructor function. You need to pass in the ID and a name when you create this create an instance of a coffee. We got a couple of functions here as well. Within the REST control, I'm going to create a list of coffees. So this is the variable that is going to hold a list of coffees. Next, let's add some coffees by using this REST API controller class, and we are going to use this coffee add all list of these coffees. So this is basically just some random coffees that I'm going to add to this list. Let's create our first mapping, which will return all the coffees stored in this variable. And the way I'm going to do that is by just creating an iterable coffee function that would be get coffee. Now, if I try to run this application, it's not going to return coffees. We need to mark this with an annotation. Let's say get mapping. Okay, I'm just going to leave that as default, save that. And now when we run our application, for example, I'm going to click on this play button. This is going to, first of all, clean. And I'm going to go to REST application, click on play, and this time it is going to build and run our application. And the port would be 8080, I believe. Let me have a look. Yeah, that's the port. Let's go to Chrome and I'm gonna try port 8080, and there we go. So here are a list of coffees that are basically being returned. Another thing I want to do here is right now we don't really have this prefix for this REST API controller. I should have named this as REST API coffee controller, but let me just mark this with a request mapping annotation with this coffees. If I save that, we will have our server reloaded. Go to Chrome and I'm gonna refresh, and this time actually we need to restart the server. So let's click on this button. I'm gonna say do not show this dialog in the future, stop and rerun. And once this is running, then we go to Chrome, refresh, and this time it says white label error page because that doesn't exist. So we're gonna have to specify this time coffees. Okay, now you can see by coffees it is returning all the coffees. So that's like returning the list. Next, we need to create a function which will give us a coffee by ID. And the way I'm going to do that is by just copy pasting that function. This is plain Java. Let me quickly walk you through about the function here. So this function is named as get coffee by ID, and we have this path variable string ID. Now this is not valid at the moment because we need to specify the mapping using Spring Boot with get mapping annotation, and this time whatever the ID that we get from the front end, it will be passed in as this path variable, type is string, and the ID. That variable holds the value coming from the front end. Other than that, this is simple function. We are just going to create a new local variable, match coffee, then we're just looping through the coffee. And if we say c.getID equals to whatever the ID that we're passing in, match add to the list, and then return the list as well. Okay, so that's a very, very simple function. I'm going to save this and let's go to Chrome. Actually, first of all, rerun this project, recompile it. Let's go to Chrome. And right now, if I refresh, I can see the IDs for all the coffees currently stored. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just copy this ID, okay? And I'm going to paste that here, slash paste, okay? So you can see what's happening here. If we got this coffee slash ID, enter, and this time it only returns that particular ID. As you can see, it's pretty cool now because we can specify an ID and return the specific coffee from the list. Next, we want to add an ability to add coffees to this list. The way we can do that is by just using this function. Okay, so here we got this post coffee function. It has a request body annotation, which is again coming from Spring Boot, type coffee, and a variable coffee. And what I'm going to do is add a post mapping. So let's type post mapping. Okay, so this will basically make this endpoint type of post. So right now we're accessing this type coffee as a type, and then this is the variable. Now all we're doing is basically we're just grabbing that coffee and adding that to the coffee list and just return the coffee. Okay, so let's go and refresh the application. Okay, and remember in our coffee class, we have two properties. One is ID and the name. Now it's time for us to actually add some data. The way we can do that is by using an application called Postman. And I'm going to open that. And within this application, I'm going to use this request. So here's the request goes to localhost 8080/coffees. So basically that's a post request. I'm going to change that to get request and send that request. And now once I get the response back, you can see I have got this list of coffees. I'm going to go to Postman and I'm going to try getting all the data first. So here's a get request for coffee. I'm going to send it. And I can see all the coffees available in that variable. I'm going to go to the next one. This is a post request, goes to localhost 8080/coffees. I'm going to try sending a new coffee that should be just stored in our Spring Boot application. Right now, if I go to get request, send the request, I get to see all the coffees available. I'm going to try adding a new one. So in the post request, I'm going to first of all using this raw. I'm going to change this from text to JSON. I'm going to paste the JSON. So here's an ID and here's a name. I'm going to send that and it returns this request status as 200, which means it was successful. And if I go to localhost 8080 and I've sent it again, this time, as you can see, there's a new ID that is being returned. Okay, we're going to verify this into Chrome browser as well. So let's go to Chrome. I'm going to refresh and here you can see I've got Awais Mirza as name and then ID as my customer ID. So data is still there. Now let's go back to IntelliJ. Next, we are going to use another endpoint, which is going to be put, which basically is going to update the data depending on the ID that you pass in. So what I'm going to do is just copy the function and paste it here. Now, I know you don't want me to type it all and you just sit there boring me watching typing. That's not really good. Now, the main takeaway from this is this put mapping. Now, if you look at all the way on the top, you see all of these are being imported by Spring Framework. Okay, so this is what's giving us all those annotation. And with the help of this annotation, Spring Boot does the magic and gives us ability to hit this by using the type of the method. Now here's a put method, put coffee method. So we're just using this path variable and taking the ID. So let me draw this like that. Okay, so that's this ID. And then the coffee that we are going to take would be coming from a request body as well. Now let's go and take a look at how do we use this now. So I'm going to go to Postman and I'm going to go and create a new one. So let's go and create a new one, and this will be put request, and let's copy this, paste it here, /ID. Now the ID we're going to grab, let's say my custom ID. Copy that, and then we are going to just put it here. Let's send it. What happens? So it says method not allowed. So put method not allowed. The reason for that is because we haven't restarted our server. Let's go and restart this by clicking on this button. Once the Spring starts again, let's go to Postman and let's see, send it, and it says bad request. So the problem is this thing has some spaces in it. That's another issue. So you need to basically encode this URL. So what I'm going to do now is go back. Actually, it's a bad request. The reason why, because when we restart the server, the data that we had in a coffee is gone. So if I refresh this, you'll see no more that Awais, Mirza, and custom ID there. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this ID. I'm going to go here and paste it here. Okay, let's send. It says bad request. So what's happening here? We're going to go to body, use the raw, and here I'm going to use the JSON. Let's create this as a JSON, and I'm going to first of all give it the ID. Let's say 123, and then the name, second custom coffee. Okay, let's send this. Okay, it says 123 second custom coffee. Let's go to the first API request. I'm gonna send this again. Now you'll see it basically updated that coffee with the ID that we passed in. So if I go and copy this ID, let's go back and then paste it here. Let's send it, and it's gonna update that as well. You can verify that by sending it again. Oops, we go here, send it again, and you'll see we have a ID 123 and second custom ID. Because I sent it twice here, that's why it made a duplicate of it. Because our code is basically not really solid. It's just to show you how you can create endpoints. Now you can see we can update coffee by using this method. All right. Next, ability to delete. That's another annotation in Spring Boot. Very, very simple. Here is it, delete mapping /ID. And this is going to, let's say this ID is this one. And then once it gets inside, so what it does, it basically, it finds it. If the coffee get ID equals to the ID that we're passing in here, this one, then it's gonna just remove that. All right, let's restart the Spring server. And I'm gonna go back to Postman. And Mr. Postman is going to help us send a request. So let's send a request. You'll see all the IDs here. Okay. And I'm gonna grab an ID of this. It's a Lorino coffee. We're gonna go and just duplicate this tab. And I'm going to change that ID to, let's say this ID, change the method to delete, and that's it. If I go ahead and delete this, then it should not be appearing here now. So let's send. You'll see we have 3 copies. We go and delete one more. So I'm just gonna copy this, go to this endpoint, and then send it again. Let's send, and you get to see the 200 response there, which is good. Let's go and take a look at, if we have that coffee there. Okay, we don't have that copy because we didn't really copy it properly. So let's copy it again. And let's paste it. And then send that. And this time, if I send it, it should not have this copy. So what's going on here? We have some issues while we're sending this delete request. So let's do this time. Let's say what happens now. Let's go and send this, and you see it's gone. So grab the ID, copy it, paste it here. Okay, and then send it. Go here and then send. We got one coffee left. I'm gonna go to Chrome and I'm gonna refresh this, and we only have one coffee there, as you can see. Okay, so what we've achieved in this 15 to 20 minutes video. So we basically created a full-fledged Spring API using Spring Boot, and then we created this coffee class and created a Crud operation API for this class. And the next future videos, I'm going to show you how you can connect to database. So whatever the coffees you're going to create will basically be stored in the database, and on the restart of the server, you won't lose the state of your coffees. So yeah, I'm really excited for the next video. And if you like this tutorial, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll speak to you guys in the next one. Cheers.